When a man has been present, truly present in a woman's life, something interesting happens when he finally steps back. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, almost unnoticeable at first, like a familiar background sound that suddenly goes missing. But with time, that absence begins to echo. It becomes a mirror, revealing what was once overlooked, dismissed, or taken for granted. You see, human beings are wired to adapt, and we adapt quickly to comfort. When someone consistently shows up for us, we subconsciously file their presence under constant, as if their energy is guaranteed. But nothing in life is guaranteed, not love, not loyalty, not effort. And the moment that constant becomes inconsistent, the mind begins to search for what was lost. A woman often starts missing a man the moment she realizes the emotional quiet he leaves behind is not actually quiet at all. It's a kind of emotional hunger. She notices that his check-ins, his small acts of service, the way he listened without judgment, or even the way he grounded her during moments of uncertainty, these weren't just habits. They were contributions, they were investments. And when those investments stop, the void they leave becomes undeniable. It isn't simply missing the man, it's missing the feeling of being understood by him. There's a psychological principle that explains this. We rarely appreciate emotional labor until it's gone. Emotional labor can be invisible, but it has weight. When a man consistently offers emotional support, stability, or direction, he becomes a kind of anchor. Not the controlling kind, no, the centering kind. The kind that allows someone to breathe more deeply, think more clearly, and navigate life with a little more confidence. When that anchor is removed, even for a moment, life feels slightly off balance. And that imbalance makes her reflect. There's a moment, an honest human moment, when she catches herself reaching for a phone to tell him something. Maybe something funny, maybe something stressful, maybe something small. And then she remembers he's not there in the same way anymore. That moment, that pause, is where missing him begins, because it forces her to confront the truth that his presence wasn't just convenient, it was meaningful. And with time, she starts tracing back the ways he added value, not because she wants to rewrite history, but because absence highlights presence. What used to blend into the background now stands out with startling clarity. His patience, his encouragement, the way he made her feel safe, these start to appear not as ordinary gestures, but as extraordinary ones. And here's the deeper truth: people don't miss what they never valued. They only miss what they didn't value enough. Psychologically, the mind is drawn toward contrast. In his absence, the contrast between who he was and what she's experiencing now becomes clearer. The silence where his voice used to be, the emotional space where his support once lived, the lack of that steady masculine energy she once had easy access to, these contrasts sharpen her awareness. What was once familiar now feels rare. What was once expected now feels precious. And what was once dismissed begins to feel irreplaceable. That's when genuine missing begins, not from loneliness, not from dependency, but from recognition. Recognition that something good was present, something solid, something steady, and she realizes that the man she took for granted was not just a chapter in her life. He was a lesson in presence, consistency, and care. If she's honest with herself, she may even recognize something deeper, that his absence has become her teacher. It teaches her to slow down, to reassess her own patterns, to question why she overlooked what mattered. It teaches her that emotional generosity is not guaranteed. It teaches her that when someone shows up fully, wholeheartedly, consistently, it is a privilege, not an entitlement. And that realization can feel both heavy and liberating. Heavy because it carries a sense of loss, liberating because it sparks growth. It pushes her toward becoming someone who no longer overlooks what is valuable. Because the truth is simple: we grow when we reflect, and reflection often requires a moment of stillness, a moment created by absence. And so the message is this: never wait until something good is gone before recognizing its worth. Use the quiet moments to listen for what life is trying to show you, because insight always rises from silence. There comes a moment, often long after the dust has settled, when a woman realizes that what she lost was not just a man, but an entire emotional ecosystem he helped create. It's easy to underestimate the quiet ways someone supports you, especially someone who does it without grand gestures, without fanfare, without asking for applause. But emotional labor, the deep and often invisible work of caring for someone, holds a weight you only notice when it's gone. When a man consistently provides emotional support, he becomes more than a partner or companion. He becomes a stabilizing force. And when that force is suddenly absent, the shift is felt not only in what he used to do, but in how he made life feel. That stability, that emotional grounding, is something she may have moved through without naming. But the moment it disappears, the air around her begins to feel thinner, as if she's climbing a hill that used to feel flat. What many people overlook is that emotional labor shows up in the smallest, simplest patterns: the gentle way he checked in after a long day, the way he reminded her of her strengths when she doubted herself, the way he noticed her mood before she even spoke a word. These are not dramatic acts, yet they create a sense of psychological safety, one of the most valuable, yet least acknowledged, components of a healthy relationship. And when that safety dissolves, she begins to understand the magnitude of what he carried. There's a subtle kind of heartbreak that happens when someone realizes they didn't fully appreciate what they had. It's not loud or chaotic, it's reflective. It's a slow awakening. She starts replaying moments not to idealize him, but to understand the role he played in her day-to-day life. She notices how differently challenges feel without his perspective. She feels the absence of his encouragement, the way he could ground her thoughts when they spiraled. She recognizes the shift in her emotional landscape. It's not as steady, not as warm, not as reassuring. And psychologically, this realization is powerful because emotional labor often goes unrecognized until there's no one left to do it. Human beings are wired to notice change far more than consistency. So while he was offering stable love, patient listening, and thoughtful presence, those things could blend into the routine of daily life. They could be misinterpreted as ordinary because they were consistent. But consistency is never ordinary. Consistency is intention. Consistency is effort. Consistency is love in its most disciplined form. The moment he stops offering that emotional refuge, she feels the difference in her body before she even understands it in her mind. The conversations don't feel as rich. The world feels a little more harsh. The nights feel a little more quiet. Not because she needs a man to complete her, but because she had a man who helped lighten the emotional load, and she didn't fully recognize it at the time. And that's when the missing begins, not from attachment, but from clarity. Clarity that he wasn't simply talking to her, he was supporting her. He wasn't just listening, he was holding space for her. He wasn't just present, he was intentional about being someone she could lean on. That kind of emotional generosity is rare, and once she realizes it, she begins to understand the depth of what she lost. There is also a philosophical layer to this. Emotionally generous people expand our world. They increase our capacity to feel safe, to feel connected, to feel seen. When they leave, the world doesn't just feel smaller, it feels louder, more chaotic, because we're suddenly carrying what they used to help us hold. And in that contrast, she recognizes the profound impact he had on her sense of well-being. This realization can soften a person. It humbles them. It invites them to ask deeper questions about how they show up in relationships, how they acknowledge the efforts of others, and how they allow themselves to receive love. It becomes a turning point, not just in how she sees him, but in how she sees herself. Because the truth is, this emotional labor is love in action, and love in action should never be taken lightly. So let this be the lesson she carries forward, and the message we take with us: honor the people who show up for you in quiet, consistent ways, because their care is a gift, and their absence is often the teacher that reminds you why it mattered. There is a moment, quiet, unexpected, but deeply revealing, when a woman begins to compare what she has now to what she once had. Not out of nostalgia, not out of longing for the past, but out of a very human instinct to measure experiences side by side. Contrast is one of the strongest forces in human psychology. It sharpens perception, it brings truth into focus. And when a woman finds herself engaging with new people, new environments, new emotional dynamics, she begins to feel the difference between the consistency she once knew and the inconsistency she may now be facing. She notices how conversations feel different, how the tone shifts, how the ease she once felt is no longer effortless. Maybe the new person in her life doesn't listen with the same attentiveness. Maybe the laughter doesn't come as naturally. Maybe she doesn't feel as safe opening up, because emotional safety is not something you can fake. It's either there or it isn't. This is where the contrast becomes its own kind of teacher. She remembers how effortlessly the man she took for granted made her feel grounded. She remembers how he created a space where she could be soft, expressive, imperfect, without fear of judgment. And now, as she learns to navigate a different emotional terrain, she begins to recognize that what she once called normal was actually exceptional. Because it's only when she experiences different energies that she realizes not everyone has the capacity to hold space in the same way. Not everyone communicates with intention. Not everyone cares with consistency. Not everyone loves with emotional maturity. And slowly, the clarity begins to deepen. The man she undervalued was offering her something rare. The mind has a way of replaying patterns when faced with new contrast. She starts to compare not because she wants to dwell on the past, but because she intuitively feels the difference in how she is treated. And those differences speak louder than any memory. She sees that the new people in her life might be charming but not steady. They might be exciting but not dependable. They might offer attention, but not understanding. And that realization brings her face to face with a truth she overlooked before. The quiet man she once took for granted was offering a form of love that had depth, substance, reliability. Philosophically, contrast is the lens through which humans understand value. You can't appreciate warmth until you feel cold. You can't appreciate consistency until you experience inconsistency. You can't understand the power of emotional grounding until you've walked through emotional chaos. Sometimes we have to sit in the discomfort of the present to finally honor the beauty of what we once had. And this is where missing him truly begins, when she sees someone try to replicate what he did with ease and fail, when she realizes that the level of emotional presence he gave her is not the standard, it was the exception. When she recognizes that not all affection carries the same sincerity, not all attention carries the same intention, and not all love carries the same spiritual weight. This contrast also brings her back to herself. It makes her question why she overlooked what was valuable, why she minimized what was meaningful, and why she allowed familiarity to dull her appreciation. This isn't self-blame, it's self-awareness. It's the moment when she realizes that taking someone for granted isn't about malice, it's about unconsciousness, and contrast brings consciousness back into the room. She becomes aware of how deeply she felt held, even in the moments she didn't acknowledge. She becomes aware of how much he contributed, even in the moments she didn't notice. She becomes aware that the ease she felt with him wasn't accidental. It was the result of his quiet emotional work, his consistency, his sincerity, his presence. That awareness can be bittersweet. It can feel like waking up and realizing the sun was shining the entire time, but you were too distracted to feel its warmth. And now, standing in the shadow of new experiences, she feels the coolness of what's missing. But contrast is not here to punish her, it's here to teach her. It teaches her that value is something you recognize not in the grand moments, but in the everyday patterns of a person's character. It teaches her to look more deeply at how people show up for her. It teaches her to honor good energy when she sees it, and to hold it with gratitude. And the message that rises from all of this is simple, but powerful. Contrast reveals truth, so when life shows you the difference between what is real and what is temporary, pay attention. There comes a point when the missing transforms into something deeper, something that goes beyond longing and slips into reflection. It's in this space of quiet contemplation that a woman begins to confront her own patterns, her own choices, her own emotional history. The absence of the man she once took for granted becomes more than a feeling, it becomes a lesson. Not a punishment, not a consequence, but a moment of awakening. Because loss, when understood with honesty, has the power to shape us into better, more conscious versions of ourselves. Growth doesn't always come through positivity or celebration. Sometimes it arrives through the uncomfortable realization that we didn't honor what was good while it was still within reach. She begins to understand that losing a man who loved her deeply, consistently, and generously is not just the end of a connection, it's an invitation to develop emotional maturity. A maturity rooted in self-awareness, accountability, and the courage to acknowledge where she fell short. In that reflective space, she starts asking questions she never thought to ask before. Why didn't she value the consistency he offered? Why did she overlook the emotional labor he so willingly gave? Why did she dismiss his efforts as ordinary when, in truth, they were rare? These questions don't arise to shame her, they arise to free her from repeating the same patterns. They arise so she can finally see herself clearly. There's a depth to this kind of self-examination. It's the kind that doesn't come easily, but once it begins, it moves her toward a more conscious relationship with both herself and others. She realizes that appreciation is not just an emotional response, it's a skill, a discipline, a choice. It's something you practice intentionally, not something you assume will happen when the timing is right, and she learns that neglect often comes not from lack of love, but from lack of awareness. This internal shift marks the beginning of growth. She starts recognizing the subtleties of emotional presence. She becomes more attuned to kindness, more aware of effort, more appreciative of consistency. She starts realizing that giving and receiving love requires mindfulness. You cannot value what you have if you're not awake to the ways it enriches your life. And in becoming aware, she also becomes more whole. She understands that the man she took for granted wasn't perfect, but he lived his love through action. He showed up, he stood by her, he tried. And she begins to see that the part of her that took him for granted wasn't careless. It was unhealed. It was the part of her that didn't yet know how to recognize healthy love because she had been conditioned to expect chaos, inconsistency, or disappointment. And so his calm presence didn't feel familiar. His reliability didn't feel thrilling. His stability didn't feel urgent. But now, after losing it, she realizes that stability is its own form of magic. This kind of realization softens a person. It opens the door to emotional evolution. It gives her the courage to examine not only what she wants in a partner, but who she wants to become as a partner. She learns that growth isn't about going back to reclaim what was lost. It's about becoming someone who would see and honor it if it ever came again. And here's the profound truth. Sometimes losing a good man is the catalyst that teaches her how to be good to the next one. Loss instills humility. Reflection instills wisdom. And from that wisdom, she gains the ability to love with greater awareness, deeper gratitude, and more intentional presence. She begins to understand that relationships flourish through conscious effort, through seeing what is good while it's happening, through holding on to what is steady, through valuing what is rare. And she realizes that her growth is not just for the future, it's also a way of honoring the man she once overlooked. His presence, his love, his consistency, they didn't disappear without purpose. They became her teacher. And the real transformation emerges not when she wishes she had done things differently, but when she decides she will do things differently moving forward. Because in the end, the message is unmistakably clear: let your reflection shape you, let your growth guide you, and never again overlook what is trying to love you well.